Okay, so last time we started with our discussion about organic chemistry. Paulit-ulitin ko ito ha para hindi niyo makalimutan. Organic chemistry is the study of carbon and our carbon-containing compounds. So when you say carbon, we have 4 valence electrons, and these electrons in the outermost shell of carbon are capable of forming bonds with other atoms. It might be the same carbon atom, but we can also have other elements. So that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of carbon-containing compounds. So if carbon bonds with a non-metal, also since carbon is also a non-metal, the bond form is called covalent bond, and it is a strong bond. So that is the reason why organic compounds reactions are actually slow. And another thing that you have to take note, our organic compounds are non-polar substances, therefore they don't really dissolve or mix with water and other polar solvents. And aside from that, our organic compounds have low melting points that is due to the weak intermolecular forces, or the force that's the reason why molecules stick together. So yan yung reason niya. Wait lang, let us admit them. Okay. And then class, in studying organic compounds, it's actually very important to know the different functional groups. The functional groups are actually atoms or group of atoms that are arranged in specific order, and that will be the identity of the substance, at the same time that will be responsible to its physical and chemical properties. So again, you really have to know one by one the functional groups. Number one, the specific arrangement of atoms. So we really have to look at the structure, and then also their nomenclature, how they are named. Yun yung ating pag-aaralan when it comes to the organic compound. So I guess I ended here with the examples of the different functional groups. In the exam or the quiz, I'll be giving you chemical structures of examples of compounds with carbon, and you have to identify what functional group is present in that specific structure. So you have to know the general formula. Like for example, when you say aldehyde, you have RC double bond OH. If you can see this one, even if the R is being substituted by any functional group, kasi yan naman talaga yung nire-represent ng R, dapat alam nyo na it is an aldehyde. Pag nakakita naman kayo ng COOH, and then even if the R is also substituted by any functional groups, you should have to identify that that compound is a carboxylic acid. So yun yung magiging quiz and exam natin. Questions before tayo talaga mag-continue, we will be discussing the 4 types of formula sa organic chemistry. Or do you have class clarifications? Meron kayong hindi naintindihan sa previous na lesson? Wala? So sige, let us continue. In the study of inorganic chemistry, we only have molecular formula and empirical formula. I hope you can still remember them. The molecular formula is our formula that shows us the different elements present in our compound, at the same time the number of atoms, and that is represented by the presence of subscripts. Okay? Presence of subscripts tayo dyan when you say molecular formula. So for example, NaCl. So that is the molecular formula of sodium chloride. It shows us that meron siyang sodium and also chloride. Okay? And then, we also have the empirical formula. So inorganic chemistry ito ha. Empirical formula are the simplified formula. So pag pwede natin siyang ma-simplify or ma-reduce, then we do that. and we call that empirical formula. But for the structures and the types of formula for organic chemistry, we have actually 4 types. So marami tayong pwedeng gawin when it comes to the molecular formula, I mean for the formula of our organic compounds. So we have here number 1, molecular formula. The same thing with the inorganic chemistry. We also have molecular formula here, and this will also tell us what elements are present in our compound, and at the same time it will show us the number of atoms, and that is also represented by the subscript. However, molecular formula will not really show us the bonding pattern, whether it is single bond or double bond or aling elements ang nakaband kanino. Basta, pag sinabing molecular formula, identify lang natin yung atoms or yung elements present and the number of atoms. So just like when you say butane, butane has 4 carbons and 10 hydrogen. So kaya sinusulat natin si molecular formula for butane as C4H10. Parang isa-summarize lang natin siya. And then also with octane, we have C8H18. So again, isa-summarize lang natin siya, ano yung mga elements present and also the number of atoms. That's a molecular formula. But if you see it like this, class, if you see like this formula showing you the bonding patterns, we call it a structural formula. So for structural formula, it will really show us the location of the chemical bonds between our atoms. So the bonds are being represented by short line, just like this one here. Oh, wait. So we have here the bond between hydrogen and carbon. So if it will really show us this one, the bonding, we call it this again structural formula. So if isang bond, if single bond lang siya, you will just see one line also. But if meron na tayong multiple bonds, for example, double bond will be represented by 2 lines. And triple bond, syempre, with 3 short lines. So pag nakita natin yan lahat, that will be called structural formula. So as you can see, this one is the structural formula of ethane. And itong C2H6, that will be the molecular formula. Again, the molecular formula will just be summarizing everything. Like you have 2 carbons and 6 hydrogens for ethane. And that is also true for propane. We have here the molecular formula at the bottom. And if we want to show how the bonding is done, then we will be doing a structural formula just like this one. So you see 1, 2, 3 carbons bonding with each other, and surrounding them are hydrogens. Okay? And also we have here the ethanol, or we commonly call this as ethyl alcohol. So if we will show the structural formula, we will be showing that carbon and carbon are bonded with each other, and that the OH here will be bonded to the last carbon. The rest of the hydrogen will be distributed also to the 2 carbons. But if we will write the molecular formula, then that is called C2H6O. So if you check that, it really has 2 carbon, 6 hydrogens, and 1 oxygen. So I hope you have seen the difference now of the molecular formula and the structural formula. You can ask question if you are confused about something, if you don't understand something about the formula of our organic compounds. Now, We have the third type of formula. We call it condensed formula. For the condensed formula, it will show us the sequence or arrangement of atoms or group of atoms. Meaning we will be grouping together those atoms that are bonded with each other, and that we will arrange them in a sequence. So for example, we have here the methane. This one is actually both the condensed formula and the molecular formula of methane. Kasi if we are going to draw the structural formula, it should have looked like this. You have hydrogen, hydrogen, another hydrogen here, and then a hydrogen in the left side. So this is the structural formula of methane. If we will write the molecular formula, that's C and then apat na hydrogen, so H4. And for the condensed formula, since all are bonded with carbon, then we can just group it together as CH4. That is just simply methane. So that is actually the simplest organic compound natin. But how about, for example, ethane? So for ethane class, if we will draw the structural formula, you have C, double bond C. And then remember class that carbon has 4 valence electrons. So meron siyang tatlo pa kasi only one electron is bonded with another carbon. So meron pang free na tatlo for bonding, and that will be for the hydrogen. So if you fill in mo siya with hydrogen here, and this becomes the ethane now. This is again the structural formula. But if you are asked to write the molecular formula, syempre you just have to summarize this. Meron siyang dalawang hydrogen, dalawang carbon, and how many hydrogen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So C2H6. This will be the molecular formula. So let us label them. This is the structural formula and this is the molecular formula. But when it comes to the condensed formula class, we will actually group them together. Actually, what do we group together is the carbon. So you have one group here for this carbon. So everything, all the hydrogen that is bonded with carbon will be one group. And then this one is another group here. And then we will summarize each of them, but it is according to group. That is not really the same with the molecular formula. So if we group them together, you have one carbon and then 3 hydrogen, so we call it CH3, and this is bonded with another CH3. That's how we do the condensed formula. So again, it is different from the molecular formula because the molecular formula will just summarize everything but will not really show us the bonding pattern. So actually, some will write this as CH3, CH3. Okay? Minsan hindi na sinasali itong bonding at the center because it is understandable that carbon is bonded with this carbon and that it is only a single bond. But if it is a multiple bond, then you really have to show the bonds at the center. Siyempre, pag double bond, dalawa. Kapag triple bond, tatlo. Okay? So that is how we make our condensed formula for ethane. Now for propane, propane actually has 3 carbons. So do not worry because I will teach you how to identify also the structures based or how to draw the structure based on the given name. So medyo confusing pa siya ngayon kasi hindi pa natin naturo what do you mean by propane. May mga meaning kasi yung pangalan nila like ane. If it ends with ane, it means it's an alkane and that all bonds will be single bonds. And then if it starts with prop, it means it has 3 carbons. So ituturo ko din yan sa inyo. I will just show you first the difference between the different types or the various types of our formula for organic compounds. So for propane, if we are going to draw its its structural formula, we have here 1, 2, 3, tatlong carbon, and then remember, 4 na bonds for each carbon. So itong nasa gitna, since 2 bonds are already occupied, then meron na lang siyang 2 extra. And then we have here 3 for the right side na carbon. And this will be filled up with hydrogen. So that is actually for organic compounds. Everything will be filled up with hydrogen. Ayan. So this becomes now the structural formula of our propane. Now for our chemical or molecular formula, syempre we will just summarize it. We have C3, we have 1, 2, 3 carbons, and hydrogen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is now the molecular formula of our propane. But again, for the condensed formula, remember, we are going to group them, ayan, into 1. So this one is group 1 kasi all the hydrogens are bonded with this carbon. So na-carbon yung ating groupings based on the carbons. So we have another group here. We have 1 carbon but 2 hydrogens are just bonded to it. And then we have the third group here. Thus, if we write the condensed formula, then we have for the group 1, we have the CH3. At the center, we have CH2. And then we have CH3 sa right side. So this one again is the condensed formula of our propane. Or you can just simply write it as CH3, CH2, CH3. Since this one are just single bonds, we can actually omit them if we write the condensed formula. So I hope naintindihan what condensed formula is. Questions? Yeah, tama yan siya, Mariam. Sa organic chemistry, the molecular formula can also be simplified and thus we can also write empirical formula. So that is applicable. The empirical formula is also applicable in organic chemistry. Okay, anything else? Wala na? Pwede pa rin yan siya ha. Let me show you an example para ma-picture out nyo what do I mean. So for example, we have this one, C2H6. This will be the molecular formula. So if you are asked to make the empirical formula, then you just have to simplify this. So yung common factor nila is 2. So this becomes C only, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this will become CH3. Okay, that's how we do it for the empirical formula. Now, the last one, the last type of formula for the organic chemistry is the so-called line formula. So, minsan makakakita kayo nito. This is the simplest representation of a molecule and we are just drawing them using lines. And when we are drawing lines, we are assuming that on each intersection, again, we are assuming that on each intersection, merong carbon at the center. Okay, wait. So we have here carbons at the intersection. Yan yung ina-assume natin when it comes to the line formula. So lahat ha, at the end or even at this intersection, at the end of both both ends of the line, meron yan siyang carbon. Yan yung ina-assume natin. And that even if it is not shown, also, this carbon also has hydrogen. Because remember, para maging stable si carbon, dapat makomplete niya yung 4 bonds na yan with the electrons. And then, if there is the presence of multiple bonds, then we just have to write, for example, ito siya. Let me clear the screen. Ayan, pag double bond, ayan, makikita nyo class na meron siyang dalawang linya. That is representing na double bond exists between this carbon and this carbon here. So, pero again, if you fill in pa rin sila ng hydrogen kasi dalawang bonding lang yan. So, if you fill in pa rin yan siya ng hydrogen dyan. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's have the ethane first. Yung ethane natin, di ba sinulat natin yung kanyang structural formula kanina. We have this one. Dalawang hydrogen, ay dalawang carbon, tapos all the remaining bonds will be filled with hydrogen. Okay, so yan yung ating ethane. Tapos yung molecular formula niya, C2H6. Ang condensed formula niya, CH3 bond CH3. But if we write the skeletal formula for our ethane, it is just this one. It can be this one or this one or this one as long as it's just one line. Why? Ganun isa lang siya ka-line. Kasi diba we assume that the ends here will have carbon. So since we only have 2 carbons here, we assume that this end here has a carbon and then this one here is another carbon. And then since single bond lang yan siya, so wala ka nang makikita na another extra bond here. So kahit paano mo siya i-drawing, horizontal, vertical, as long as it's just one line, then that is ethane. Okay? And then another example, let's have the propane. So we also have the propane a while ago. So we have C, tatlong carbon, and then the remaining bonds will be filled with hydrogen. So do not forget ha, hanggang 4 lang. Hindi pwedeng sumobra. So hanggang 4 lang na bonds. So if we check 1, 2, 3, 4, so tama na itong first carbon. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is also good. 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So good na din yan siya. So that's the structural formula of our propane. But for the molecular formula, this is C3H, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ayan. And the condensed formula kanina, di ba sinulat natin, CH3, this is one group here. This is bonded sa CH2. And then, the last one will have the CH3. That's the condensed formula. But for the skeletal formula, we will be drawing lines here. So, one line. So, you have 1, 2. We have 2 carbons na. So, I will be drawing another one here. Okay? So, this is 3 carbons na all in all. So, this will now represent the propane. Kasi, di ba again, the ends of the line will have carbon. So, we have carbon here, and then carbon here, and then another carbon here. So, all in all, we have 3 carbons. We will be assuming also that we have hydrogens bonded to each carbon. That's how we do the line formula. Again, that is our simplest formula for organic chemistry. So this is not actually a structural formula. This one is called a condensed formula. This one is but1-ene, meaning on the first carbon, we have a double bond. And then but means 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the first carbon, meron siyang in, meaning na meron siyang double bond. That's the condensed formula. So pag i-draw natin yung kanyang line formula, we have first carbon here, so we will draw a line ending with this carbon. And then since we have another carbon, let's have here another line. So this is good also, but still we have another carbon there. So we will be drawing another line. So kung bibilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, we already have 4 carbons. But since meron tayong double bond here on the first carbon, then we will just be drawing another line here sa baba. So ito na ngayon ang skeletal formula ng ating but1-ene. That's inorganic compound, ha? And what's their difference with the but2-ene? But means again 4 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 means on the second carbon tayo merong double bond, and ene is again the double bond. So if we draw this, the same pa rin. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 na carbons yan. Ay, sorry. Nasubraan. Just let me delete this. Ulit. So this is 1, 2, 3, and then 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 carbons, but again, the double bond is on the second carbon. This is the second carbon here, so you will be drawing the double bond here sa baba niya. Pero that is again the skeletal formula. Questions? Lang, ha? Wala?
None po, ma'am.
Okay. Pwede pa rin yung line formula sa methane. The methane has no line formula. Okay? Yung methane is a unique one. Since it only has 1 carbon, hindi tayo makakapag-draw ng line formula kasi the line will always have 2 ends. So the line formula is applicable for organic compounds containing 2 carbons or more. Kasi again, pag mag-draw ka ng line, dalawang end na yan. So mag-a-assume tayo na may carbon dito and then another carbon here. But for the case of methane, since 1 carbon lang siya, we cannot draw a skeletal formula for that. Okay? Anything else? Sige. Si line formula is not really applicable for all compounds. It will be except for methane. Again, methane kasi class is a gas, remember? It's CH4. That is its molecular, both molecular formula and condensed formula. And for its structural formula, it looks like this. You have H, 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 H. Ayan. So again, this is the structural formula here. We cannot draw a line formula for this one. So hindi siya applicable for methane. Isang carbon lang siya. Hindi ka makakapag-draw ng line na isa lang ang end, ang ending. Dalawang end talaga yan pag nag-draw ka ng line. So ma-automatic 2 carbons na siya. Okay? Sige, so I hope naintindihan ang 4 na types of formula for organic chemistry. Questions? Wala? Sige. So we have here the chemical bond. Actually, I have already introduced them to you. When you say chemical bond, it's the attraction between one atom to another atom. It's actually the connection, and it will hold the atoms together so that we can have our chemical substances. So for example, diba, if we have water, it doesn't mean that we only have H2O. Just one H2O. Maraming molecule. But these molecules contain H2 and O. Pero again, maraming molecules, and then they stick together due to the so-called chemical bonds. That is the intermolecular forces. So wait lang ha. Let me show you the illustration. So example, you have H and dalawang oxygen. So this is one molecule, and this one here are called chemical bonds. They will hold the atoms together so that they will stick to each other. And then you have another molecule here na meron pa ring H and then baliktad. Alam ko there is something wrong. Nasa to nga ang O. Dalawang hydrogen. And then you have another molecule here. Merong dalawang hydrogen and oxygen at the center. So yung bond naman na reason why these two molecules stick with each other are still called chemical bonds. Actually, mga intermolecular forces yan sila. So we have here bonds joining the atoms, and then we also have bonds joining our molecules. So mga chemical bonds yan sila. Now, for organic chemistry, we have also types of bonds. We have the so-called single bond, which means there is a single covalent bond in which the atoms are sharing one pair of electrons. Pag sinabing one pair of electrons, it is composed of 2 electrons, ha? So just like this one, if carbon is bonded with this carbon and then meron siyang single bond, it means one pair of electron is being shared. You have, let me draw it, we have 1 electron for this side and then another electron for this side. So they are being shared. And since we only have 2 electrons being shared, single bond lang yan siya, class. Okay? So if we draw the electron dots here, remember carbon has 4 valence electrons. The same thing with this carbon. So each of them will be sharing 1 electron. So as they share, yung bond na form. So single bond lang siya. So this will be the bond here. Single bond. Okay? So that is also true for methane. Single bond pa rin yan siya between the carbon and all the other hydrogen. So meron kang electron dyan and then meron ka ding electron at the end. So all in all, single bond pa rin. That is also true here, also with this hydrogen and this hydrogen. So the single bond, it is not just for carbon and another carbon. It can be other elements as long as the electrons na na-share nila is 1 pair lang. So tag-iisa sila mag-share ng electron. So single bond yan siya. Now, we also have multiple bonds for organic chemistry. So we have here double bond. In which 2 pairs naman na electron yung sinishare. So when you say 2 pairs, ano yan siya? 4 electrons all in all. So just like this one. C, double bond, C. Or carbon, double bond, carbon. Ito class, both ends of the band has an electron. So if we look at it, we have the electron dots. 4 carbons yung kada electron kada carbon ha. Pero ang mangyayari dyan, this carbon will share 2 electrons. The other 2 will be free. Well, this carbon will also share 2 electrons and the other carbons will be free. So ito ngayon class yung magpo-form ng double bond. So this one is 1 bond here and then another bond here. All in all, 2 pairs of electron will be shared forming the double bond. So yan yung nangyayari pag nagpo-form na ng double bond. Wait lang. Sige. So we have other examples of molecules na merong double bonds. Ito yung ethylene kanina, C double bond C. And then the remaining na electrons will be bonded with hydrogen. In the case of acetone, so we have here carbon at the center Bonded siya with another carbon and then another carbon here. And instead of a hydrogen or another carbon, this will be double bonded to oxygen. So meaning yan, carbon will be sharing 2 electrons here and oxygen will also be sharing 2 electrons. That is why they formed double bond. Okay? These are just examples. And then we have triple bond. So in the case naman of triple bond, the atoms will share 3 pairs of electron. So since 3 pairs, actually all in all, we have 6 electrons na. So kagaya nito, carbon, 3 electrons yan ang shinare niya. That is also true for this carbon. So isang electron na lang yung free for bonding. So pwede siya hydrogen. So if we look at the electron dots for this, you have, diba, 2 carbons. This first carbon here will share 3 electrons. So isang electron na lang yung free niya. So ayan, that is also true for this carbon. And this carbon will also share 3. So ayan, kaya sila magpo-form ng triple bonds. So this is one bond here, another bond here, and another bond sa baba. Okay? So the rest, ito, free ito siya. Pwede siya mag-bond to hydrogen. Okay? So that will be the triple bond. So we have here the example, the ethane. So you have triple bonds here forming between the carbons and the extra bond. Since apat lang talaga ang kaya ni carbon para maging stable din siya. So itong free niya will be bonded with hydrogen. That is also true for this carbon. Sige, questions for our bondings for the organic chemistry. Wala. Okay? Wala na. Wait lang, pababa na ako. Okay, wala na. So we will now move on to the nomenclature. Pag sinabing nomenclature, that's the system of naming. Meaning we have rules for the naming of our organic compounds. Iba ang ating rules ay iba ang rules natin in the naming of organic compounds sa sa inorganic chemistry. Sa inorganic chemistry, yung sodium chloride, ganon. The ending, the second compound will be changed to IDE. Okay? So, yun yung system natin doon sa naming. Pero this time, for organic chemistry, it's a completely different rule. And we are actually using the IUPAC nomenclature system. So, di ba yung last week, parati kong mini-mention yung IUPAC. IUPAC means International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. That is the organization na responsible in establishing the rules for the naming of our organic compounds. So, sila yung gumawa. Paano natin i-name itong carbon-containing compounds natin. So as we move on in the study of the different functional groups, I will also be teaching you the system, the IUPAC system for the naming. So ano ito? Standard and universal, and it is accepted sa tibuok kalibutan. Okay, mo na ito ang ginagamit worldwide. Okay? So let's start first with our first functional group. We have here the alkane and the cycloalkanes. For the alkanes class, I think I have introduced them to you. Alkanes only contain hydrogen and carbon since they are under the hydrocarbons. But what is unique for alkanes is that single bonds lang lahat. So the carbon-to-carbon bonding are single bonds. That is also true for the carbon and the hydrogen bonding. Everything will be just single bonds. We call them alkanes. Take note, wala kang ibang makikita dyan na atom except for carbon and hydrogen. And then we have class a general formula for alkane. We have CnH2n plus 2. CnH2n plus 2. We actually use this formula to predict how many hydrogen will be present in our alkane. So N there will be the number of carbons. Okay? Again, number is, and there is the number of carbon. So for example, you only have 1 carbon. So C1, pero di ba remember, even in an organic chemistry, we don't really write the subscript 1. We automatically write, example, the symbol of the element like carbon. And then H, kung isang kung isang carbon ito, how many hydrogen will that be? So this is 2 times N, so that is 1 plus 2. So PEMDAS tayo. C, 1 lang ito. And then H is 2 times 1 equals 2 plus 2, 4. So ito yung magiging formula ng alkane with 1 carbon only. So di ba we call this the methane. So paano kung 2 carbons? So like C2 and then H2N. So 2 times 2 plus 2. So paano daw kung 2 carbons yung alkane natin? So this becomes now C2 and then for the hydrogen, 2 times 2 is 4 plus 2, it's 6. So this will be now the formula of our ethane. Okay, that's how you know the formula, the molecular formula of our alkanes if we just know how many carbons is present in the compound. So kung butane class, butane is 4 na carbon, so C4. And then para ma-predict natin yung number of hydrogen para sa butane natin, ganun pa rin ang gagawin nyo. 4 times 2 plus 2. So this will be C4. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 2, 10. So this will be now the chemical or the molecular formula of butane. So do not forget our general formula for alkanes, CnH2n plus 2. Questions so far?
None po.
Okay, wala. Sige, do not forget that Number 1, ulit ko para hindi niyo makalimutan, alkanes are hydrocarbons, meaning you will only see carbon and hydrogen. And then sa alkanes, we only have single bonds, both for carbon to carbon and carbon to hydrogen bonding. And then number 3, our general formula for alkanes, CnH2n plus 2. Though ang nakabutang diha, CnHn2 plus 2. Mas dali manggod iingon ang CnH2n plus 2. N is the number of carbon. Okay? Now, we also have the so-called alkyl groups here for our alkane. Pag naging alkyl yan siya class, it means na minusan siya ng isang hydrogen. Kasi isa-substitute siya with another atom. Okay, another atom, it can be another carbon, basta it's not hydrogen. So ano nangyari for the alkyl? Ganito, di ba nagsulat tayo ng methane kanina, na si methane ay merong 4 na hydrogen. Pag tinanggal natin itong isang hydrogen na ito, we call this methane, right? Again, we call this methane. Pag tinanggal natin yung isang hydrogen na yan, so magiging ganito na lang siya. And then, ito siya, ito dito, yung bonding na ito will be free to bond to other elements. Ang tawag na natin is alkyl. To be specific, we call this methyl. But do not forget, I am just showing you paano naging methyl si methane. Just remove 1 hydrogen and replace it with other atoms, it can be carbon, and then that the name will not be ending with ane anymore. Instead, it will end with il. So it becomes methyl. Kung sa ethyl naman siya nangyari, di ba? Ethane looks like this. Ayan. Ethane looks like this. Now, if we remove this example, ito yung ni-remove natin na hydrogen. So, and then magiging free ito for bonding to other carbons or to other elements. Then this time, it's not ethane anymore. We call this ethyl. So, the ending will not be ane anymore. It will be il. So, we call it alkyl group. Okay? Ma-encounter nyo talaga. Example, 2-methyl butane. Anong nangyari dyan? Bakit naging 2-methyl butane yan siya? This is 1 carbon here, another carbon here, 1, 2, and then 3, and then 4. So meaning butane yan siya, 4. Pero meron ka kasing extra dito na, ano yan? Carbon. Pero take note, ano yung branch na ito? CH3. So hindi siya CH4. CH4 is methane. Ito kulang siya ng isa, CH3 lang siya, kaya ang tawag natin dyan, methyl. So pag nabawasan ng isang hydrogen yung ating group of carbon, we change the name, the ending from ane to il. So methyl and then the butane. Kasi 4 na carbon. I'll show you later kasi ito medyo complicated na ito sila na structure. Show ko sila later sa inyo. Dahan-dahanin natin para hindi tayo masyadong mahirapan sa organic chemistry. So let's look at this. In naming our alkanes class, nakadepende siya actually how many carbon is present in the structure. Again, it's dependent on how many carbons are present in the structure. So we have here 1 to 10 na lang muna tayo ha. 1 to 10 kasi simple lang tayo na alkanes. Okay? So the name of the alkane class, if it only contains 1 carbon, the prefix will be meth. Again, for 1 carbon, the prefix will be meth. Though meron ito sa succeeding ko na slide, pero para maintindihan niyo lang siya and then ulitin lang natin siya later. And then since this is alkane, the ending should be ane. So the prefix plus the suffix meth plus ane, we call it methane. But if we make the molecular formula and even the structural formula of methane, we will see that it contains 1 carbon and 4 hydrogen. So pag nakita nyo CH4, automatically we call it methane. But if nabawasan siya ng isang hydrogen, naging CH3 na lang siya, the ending will be replaced with il. So we call it methyl. So kagaya ng sinabi, methyl alcohol, for example, methyl alcohol. It means meron yan siyang CH3 and then since alcohol siya, meron siyang OH. So this will be now the methyl alcohol. So hindi siya methane kasi kulang nga siya ng isa, CH3 lang. Okay? And then pag 2 carbons naman, the prefix will be eth. Again, for 2 carbons, the prefix will be eth and then the ending na ane, so we call it ethane. So for ethane, di ba our general formula is CnH2n plus 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 plus 2, 6. So tama ito, C2H6. Pero pag binawasan natin ng isang hydrogen, naging H5 na lang siya, we call it ethyl. So for example, in the case of ethyl alcohol is C2H5OH. That is the ethyl alcohol that we use as disinfectant or antiseptic or even the alcohol that is present in our alcoholic drinks. Okay, nabawasan yan siya ng isang hydrogen. Okay? And then for 3 carbons class, the prefix will be prop. And syempre the ending is ane. So we call it propane. -1 hydrogen, isopropyl. Or meron tayong tinatawag na isopropyl alcohol. So later I will also show you what iso means. Kung maabutan pa natin, kung hindi, we will continue the discussion tomorrow. And then we have here for 4 carbons class, our prefix will be but. And then again, the ending na ane, so we call it butane. The gas that we use as fuel, for example, when we are cooking. Okay. Actually, they are gases. Methane is a gas. Ethane is also a gas. Most of them are used as fuel. Okay, so butane here, -1 hydrogen, we call it butyl. And then by the way, for 5 carbons, our prefix is pent. And then ane is the ending, so pentane, -1, you change the ending in -il, so pentyl. For 6 carbons, our prefix is hex, so we have hexane, -1, we call it hexyl. And then for 7 carbons, we have hept. -1, instead of heptane, we call it heptyl. And for 8 carbons, our prefix is oct. So plus the ending octane. Octyl siya, -1 hydrogen. And for 9 carbons, our prefix is non, so nonane, -1 nonyl. And lastly, we have 10 carbons, dec. So decane, pero pag -1 hydrogen, decyl. Okay? So i-memorize niyo muna. Simple alkanes muna tayo, hanggang 10 carbons lang tayo. Kasi meron pa tayong a lot of alkanes na sobra 10 yung carbons. Hanggang 10 lang muna tayo. Isa-isa lang. So 1 to 10, meth, eth, prop, but, pent, hex, hep, oct, non, and dec. You have to memorize that kasi itong mga prefix na ito are also applicable to other functional groups. Ito pa rin yung ginagamit natin for alkenes, alkyne, and even the alcohol. Mag-iiba lang yung ending ng kanilang name, pero the prefixes are the same. So, memorize these questions so far. Wala pangutana. Wala? Sure na? Okay, so let us move on. Classic. Napabudir ba siguro na ko'y ka-istoryahan. Ibalik na magkatulog. Monday na makaroon. Ito ginatawag ko Monday sickness. Bedabe, ang wala nag-react, wala diri. Masignan, balik nagtulog. Any reaction, be? Let's see. Basiguro na ninaminaw. Let's see what nag-react. Stop share. Stop share. So, nag-react. Let's see. Kani sila. Kani mga walay reaction diri. Natulog na yun ni. Okay, ang mga natulog, bahala mo dira. Bahala mo dira. Kaya medyo complicated kayo ang organic chemistry. Yes, Nicel, are you raising your hand? Or napindot?
Wala, ma'am. Napindot lang na ako, ma'am.
Okay, sige. Napindot lang. Sige, let us continue. Classification of carbon. So, the classification of carbon is also dependent on how many carbons are bonded to them. Pag primary carbon ha, isang carbon lang din ang nakabond sa kanya. So let me show you an example of a primary carbon. Si methane is a unique one kasi hindi natin siya ma-classify as either primary, secondary, tertiary, or quaternary kasi hindi naman siya nakabond with other carbon. It is only bonded to hydrogens but hindi to another carbon. So again, methane is a unique one. We don't have a carbon attached to the carbon here. But let us look at this example. We have here 3 carbons, and this one here itong nakapula is considered a primary carbon. Why it is considered a primary carbon? Because it is only attached to one carbon only. Actually, this carbon here is also a primary carbon. Bakit? Kasi siya ay naka-attach to one carbon only also. Just like this terminal carbon here. So again, do not forget, we call it primary carbon if the carbon is bonded to another or one carbon only. Magiging secondary carbon siya, class, if the carbon is bonded to another carbon atoms. So if we look at this example, actually the same, ito sila na compound. Ito sila sa end, they are called primary carbon, pero yung nasa gitna is a secondary carbon. Bakit siya tinawag na secondary carbon? This carbon is bonded to two carbons. One here and then another here. So sa carbons lang yung tinitingnan natin ha, hindi ang hydrogen. So again, we call it secondary carbon. Now how about the tertiary carbon? Tertiary carbon siya kapag bonded naman siya with three other carbon atoms. So we have the example here. Ito primary, ito din primary, and then this one is also primary kasi isang carbon lang, dito lang sila sa gitna nakaband. Pero itong nasa gitna, since ang total niyan isa, dalawa, tatlong bondings na, tertiary carbon na ang tawag sa kanya. Okay, that's tertiary carbon. And then for quaternary carbon, we have here quaternary carbon, lahat talaga ubos. Di ba si carbon, 4 na bonds ang kaya niya? Pero kung silang lahat hindi hydrogen, carbon talaga silang lahat, gaya nito at the center, magiging quaternary carbon na siya. Though yung iba, primary sila. Ito primary. Okay, we have primary carbons. Pero yung nasa gitna, quaternary kasi nakaband siya to 4 other carbon atoms. Okay? Kasi magbabago yung naming natin sa kanila depende sa classification of carbons. Hindi pa talaga tayo nagni-name, no? I have just shown you the prefixes. But later, we will be doing now. What time is it? 8:43. I still have time. So we will be doing the naming of our alkane. So nomenclature, IUPAC naming. We will be using the IUPAC name. So meron tayong mga kailangan i-memorize here na rules. Merong kailangan take into consideration the number of carbons, the classification of carbons before we'll get the correct names of our compounds. So meron din tayong suffixes na ginagamit that is dependent also on the functional groups na present. Mampag sa gitna. Ansa to Miss Tingson, mampag sa gitna.
Ano lang po, ma'am, nasaan na agad, wala pa natapos yung tanong ko po.
Okay. Sige. Sige. Again, the suffix for the naming here is dependent on the functional group na present. So, we have here, in naming the organic compound, we have the so-called parent chain, and we also have the so-called substituent. So, I will let you see later what's the difference between a parent chain and a substituent. Do not forget muna yung mga prefixes na ginagamit natin. 10 lang yung binigay ko kanina, dito pala 12. So yung sa 10, di ba dec yun? Sa 11 class, we use the prefix andec, and then 12 for dodec. And then syempre kung lahat sila lahat sila ay are alkane, single bonds lang, mag-e-end silang lahat sa ane. Pag -1 yan, pag -1 na hydrogen, i-change mo lang ang ending sa il. So ito magiging methyl, ethyl, propyl, butyl, pentyl, hexyl, heptyl, octyl, nonyl, decyl, undecyl, and dodecyl. Ano yung mangyayari pag -1 na hydrogen? Magma-1 yan siya kasi instead of hydrogen, it will be bonded to other atoms. Okay? And then before we really go into the naming, proper naming, we have to memorize the following substituents. Mga branch ito sila class, 'di ba? Sabi ko kanina may parent chain, tapos minsan may mga branching that will make the structure complicated. Pero pag makikita nyo ito, ganito yung structure niya, 3 carbon. Ayan, and then the bonding takes place here at the center. Ito yung nakaband sa parent chain na tinatawag. Again, ito yung nakaband sa parent chain. Ang gitna na carbon, we call this isopropyl. So kaya yung tinatawag natin na isopropyl alcohol, actually yung structure niya ganyan. CH3, CH, CH3 sa taas, and ito, dito nakaband si OH. So yan yung tinatawag natin na isopropyl alcohol. Alcohol because of the presence of the OH, but isopropyl kasi ganito ang structure ng kanyang carbon groups. Now, if it looks like this, 4 na carbon, 1, 2, 3, 4. Siyempre, bute, diba? And since minus hydrogen ka dito, kaya tinatawag siya na butyl. Pero sec-butyl kasi nasa second carbon yung bonding to the parent chain. Introduction pa lang ito, later na natin sila gamitin. Memorize niyo muna yung arrangement ng atoms natin. And then we have the third butyl kasi 4 din na carbon pero you have a tertiary carbon here at the center and siya yung nakaband sa parent chain natin. So again, third butyl kasi tertiary carbon ito. Nakaband siya sa 3 other carbons. 4 carbons all in all, so third butyl. And then we have the isobutyl. Butyl again kasi 4 na carbons pero the bonding takes place here sa center. I mean, not really the center, but and the last one, dito siya nakaband, isobutyl. Pag nahati, iso means the same, right? So, the same siya kasi meron kang CH3 here, another carbon here, and then the other carbon is at the center. It's bonded at the center. So iso siya. Kung hahatiin natin itong compound na ito, the same ang left side sa right side. That's what you mean with iso. So please memorize that first. We will use that one for the branching. But let's have the rules first for the naming. So please listen kay medyo lang. Complicated. How do we name the alkanes? Alkanes muna ha. Take note, identify the longest carbon chain. Again, identify the longest carbon chain and the longest chain will become the parent chain. So for example, we have here, let's not just have the hydrogens first. Meron tayo, ganito yung setup niya. Ay, isulat ko na lang yung hydrogen. CH2, wait. CH, not CH2, CH3, CH, CH3, and then CH2, CH2, C, CH, CH2, CH3, and then C. Ito yun ha, dinadraw ko ito. Pinil ko lang yung mga hydrogens. So CH, CH3, CH2, dire na lang sa taas, CH3. Ito, alkane ito talaga kasi single bond lang. So alam na natin yung ating ending ng name, it's an ane. Okay? Pero ang i-determine natin is yung number of carbons. Pero hindi ito basta-basta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We don't name this as undecane. Again, hindi natin siya ina-name na undecane. What's the prefix again for 12? It's dodecane pala. Dodecane. We don't call this automatically as dodecane. We will just call it dodecane if it is a straight chain. Kanang naadjud kay 12 kabuok na carbon class nga straight lang silang tanan. That's what we call dodecane. Pero take note of this, may mga carbons here sa taas, may mga carbons here dito, so hindi mo talaga siya sabihing straight chain siya. So we don't call it directly as dodecane. So ang gagawin natin in naming the alkanes is to identify the parent chain. The parent chain is the longest carbon chain na diretso-diretso. Okay? So magbibilang ka ngayon. Ganito ang ginagawa sa organic chemistry. Magbibilang tayo 1, 2, if I go straight, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So again, if I go straight, this is 8 carbons. Paano kung i-try kong lumiko? Dito ako mag-start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the same thing. 8 carbons yan. Pero let's try another one. Paano kung liliko ako? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is just 7 carbons here. Or kung liliko pa talaga ako, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 here. So 7 carbons din. Ito. So ang parent chain natin, class, yung longest. So 7 carbons, 7 carbons. Kung dediretso ako, 8 carbons. So ito yung aking parent chain, ang 8 carbons. So ano nga yung ano? Ano nga ang ating prefix? It's the oct, and then single bond silang lahat. So ilalagay natin octane. Okay? Octane. Ang ending niya kasi single bond lahat ane, and then 8 carbons yung parent chain natin. So again, we call it octane. Octane ha, dili siya octane. Octane. Oct lang ang 8 carbons plus the ending na ane. So ngayon, na-identify na natin ang parent chain. Pero take note na ito lang yon, itong diretsyo na ito. Hindi pa natin nasali sa naming itong mga tinatawag nating substituent or mga branch. Ito yon sila, branch or substituent. In-name, kasali pa yan sila sa naming. Pero again, nakita na natin yung parent chain natin. Okay? So that is the octane. So itong example naman sa baba, kahit anong gawin mo, you will still get 8 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kagaya pala sila nito. Pero kung dito ka mag-start, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's still 8. Bisan pag magliko-liko ka, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, pwede siya, hindi talaga straight chain, class. Pinapakita lang dito sa example sa baba na the parent chain may not be a straight chain. Pwede ka magliko-liko, parehas ani, as long as ito yung may pinakamaraming carbons na dugtong-dugtong sila. Hindi ka mag-jump. So, dugtong-dugtong talaga sila. Pinakamarami. That will become your parent chain. Okay? So, ang next niyan is actually mag-identify na tayo ng substituent. This is not the same, no? Kanina. But, wait. Tapusin natin yung kanina. Draw ko siya ulit. Fill in ko lang muna yung ating hydrogen para mabuo talaga siya. Ay, CH2, not CH3. Bakit ko siya nilalagyan ng hydrogen? Para maging buong compound talaga siya. And remember, bakit may CH3, may CH2. Kasi, di ba, 4 lang talaga ang kaya ng carbon. Ito, C siya, pero nakaband siya with another carbon, so -1. 3 hydrogen na lang ang pwede i-fill in. Itong nasa gitna, 1, 2, 3. So, isang hydrogen na lang, kaya CH lang ang nilagay ko. That's how you do it, ha? And then, itong third carbon, I'll write CH2 here, kasi one bond is taken from this bonding here, and then another bond is taken here sa bonding na ito. So, 2 hydrogen na lang ang natira. And then the fourth carbon will also be a CH2. And then this one becomes just a CH. Bakit siya naging CH? Kasi may bonding siya here for another carbon and another bonding here sa taas. So 1, 2, 3, isang hydrogen na lang ang matitira. Ito naman ay CH2 and then this one here is a CH3. Kasi dito lang siya nakaband sa carbon na ito. So may 3 electrons pa siya ang natitira and that is for hydrogen. And then after that, we have the CH also kasi meron tayong dito sa baba, CH3 ito. And then we have the CH2 and lastly the CH3. Now again, our parent chain is this one. Ito yung parent chain natin. Ayan, parent chain yan siya. So, di ba anong pangalan niya? Octane. Pero, ang next na natin ina-name is yung ating substituent. Meron tayong substituent here, and then here, and then here. Okay? Yung mga substituent class, yung mga names nila, ganun pa rin. Susundin pa rin natin yung meth, eth, yung mga prefixes, pero this time hindi sila mag-e-end sa ane kasi kulang sila ng hydrogen. So mag-e-end sila sa il. Kagaya nito, this first substituent here, instead of CH4, CH3 lang siya. So kulang siya ng hydrogen. So we will name this as methyl. Okay? And then ito din, methyl din ito. Kasi isang carbon lang siya, kulang siya ng isang hydrogen. So we will call it methane instead, methyl. And then ito, 2 carbon. These two they are treated as one substituent. So 2 carbon, di ba ang 2 carbon, ang start niyan ay F. Pero itong carbon na ito, CH2 lang siya, kulang siya ng hydrogen. Kasi nakaband siya dito sa carbon na nasa parent chain. So ito, ang tawag natin dyan sa kanya ay ethyl, hindi ethane. Ethyl. So ayan, na-identify na natin yung ating mga substituent. That will be the next step. So dito lang muna tayo mag-i-end. Mahaba-habang process pa ito, hindi pa natin na-complete ang pangalan ng ating compound. Ang na-identify pa lang natin ang parent chain natin, which is octane, and ang mga pangalan ng ating mga substituent or mga branches. We have here the methyl, 2 methyl, and you have here the ethyl. Tomorrow, we will be completing the name of this carbon-containing compound or organic compound. Questions so far before time mag-end? I hope you are listening, ha? Dili lalim ang organic chemistry. Wala'y pangutana. Anyway, naka-record ito. Pag na-confuse kayo, you can go back to the recording. I'll be giving you the link para ulitin niyo siya. Kaya dili gid siya makuha og kaisa lang. That is why wala akong nag-quiz. I will not give a quiz first.